February 7th, 2023, 4:47 a.m. Vuhledar, Donetsk Oblast. 155 Russian tanks and armored vehicles begin their assault. Pre-dawn darkness. Coordinated battalion attack. 3 separate axes of advance. 72 hours later, 150 of them are burning wrecks scattered across frozen fields. The textbooks call this a tactical disaster. Every analyst agrees on what happened, but the reason this massacre occurred, the real reason commanders kept sending wave after wave into a kill zone they knew was there. That's not what anyone thinks. This is IronBullet, and what you're about to see will change how you understand modern combined arms warfare. The official explanation makes perfect sense. Ukrainian artillery, defensive positions, high ground advantage, Russian command incompetence. Every word of that is true. Every word of that misses the point. Stay with me, because the detail that explains 150 destroyed vehicles, the reason this wasn't just another tactical failure but something far more calculated, that detail is sitting in plain sight, and nobody's talking about it. Let's start with what everyone saw. February 7th, Russia's 155th Naval Infantry Brigade and elements of the 40th Naval Infantry Brigade launched a 3-pronged assault on Vuhledar. This isn't a probing attack. This is a full mechanized push with armor, artillery support, and infantry fighting vehicles. The objective: capture Vuhledar, secure the western flank, threatening Ukrainian supply lines to Donetsk city. The terrain: open fields sloping upward toward Ukrainian positions. Minimal cover, frozen ground, perfect conditions for defenders with high ground and pre-registered fire zones. Russian forces know this. They've attacked Vuhledar twice before. Both times they've been repulsed. So why attack again? That question, we'll come back to it. Remember it, the assault begins at 4:47 a.m. 3 columns, northern axis 12 tanks, 18 BMP infantry fighting vehicles. Western axis 9 tanks, 15 BMPs. Southern axis 8 tanks, 11 BMPs. Total 29 tanks, 44 infantry fighting vehicles. Approximately 800 soldiers. Ukrainian forces observe the approach. 72nd Mechanized Brigade, 68th Jaeger Brigade. Elements of territorial defense. Artillery units positioned on high ground with clear fields of fire. They don't open fire immediately. This detail matters. We'll return to it. Russian columns advance. Standard doctrine. Tanks lead. Infantry vehicles follow. Artillery fires. Preparatory bombardment on suspected Ukrainian positions. The Ukrainians still don't fire. Russians advance to within 4 kilometers, then 3 kilometers. Confidence builds. Maybe Ukrainian forces withdrew. Maybe intelligence was wrong about defensive strength. At exactly 2.8 kilometers from the first defensive line, Ukrainian artillery opens fire. 152 with the howitzers. Pre-registered coordinates. Time on target, 19 seconds. The northern column takes the first salvo. 4 tanks destroyed. In the opening 40 seconds, 3 BMPs disabled. The column doesn't stop. Russian doctrine: push through artillery fire. Speed and momentum overcome firepower. They accelerate. The artillery shifts. Southern column, 6 rounds. 3 direct hits. 2 tanks burning. 1 BMP flipped onto its side. Crew scrambling out into small arms fire. Western column continues advancing, still taking minimal fire. Commander reports progress. Believes he's found the weak point in Ukrainian defenses. He's wrong, but he won't realize that for another 11 minutes. And by then, 23 of his vehicles will be destroyed. What happens next isn't random. It's not lucky Ukrainian fire. This is something else entirely. Something that explains not just this battle, But why Russian commanders kept sending reinforcements into the exact same kill zone for 3 more days? Let me show you. The western column reaches 1.5 kilometers from Ukrainian positions. Open ground, no cover, moving at 35 kilometers per hour across frozen fields. Ukrainian forces have been tracking them since they left their staging area 12 kilometers away. Not with radar, not with satellites, with something cheaper, something the Russians didn't think mattered. Civilian quadcopter drones, modified commercial DJI models, thermal cameras, real-time video feed to artillery fire control centers. The drones aren't attacking, they're painting targets. Every Russian vehicle has been laser ranged, every position calculated. Every route of advance mapped onto pre-registered artillery grids that were prepared 6 weeks before this assault began. The Russians aren't walking into an ambush. They're walking into a mathematical equation. And the answer has already been calculated. Western Column commander realized this at 5:03 a.m., 16 minutes into the assault. Ukrainian artillery fire intensifies. Not random salvos, precision strikes, walking fire that anticipates his maneuvers before he makes them. He orders dispersion, standard counter-battery doctrine, spread out, reduce target density. The vehicle spread, Ukrainian artillery spreads with them, because they're not guessing where the tanks will go. They're watching in real time from 400 meters altitude. Every turn, every acceleration, every attempt to find cover that doesn't exist. The Western Column loses 8 vehicles in 4 minutes. The commander orders retreat, but retreat to where? This is the moment. This is where the real trap closes. Russian doctrine plans for withdrawal under fire. Vehicles reverse, return along their approach routes, regroup at rally points behind their own artillery coverage. Standard procedure, except for one problem. The Ukrainians mined the approach routes, while the Russian artillery was firing preparatory bombardment. Not heavily, just enough. Remote detonated anti-tank mines placed by small teams under cover of artillery, noise and pre-dawn darkness. The Russians don't know this yet. They're about to find out. First vehicle retreating from the Western Column, T-72B3 main battle tank, reversing at 20 kilometers per hour, crosses the same ground it advanced over 8 minutes earlier. Mine detonates under the left track. Tank immobilized. Crew bails out. Ukrainian artillery fires on the disabled vehicle. 3 rounds, direct hit. Tank explodes. Second vehicle, BMP-2, infantry fighting vehicle, attempts to bypass the destroyed tank. Mine, right track destroyed. Vehicle slews sideways. Artillery, destroyed. Third vehicle doesn't attempt retreat. Tries to advance toward Ukrainian lines. Better to die attacking than trapped in a minefield. Ukrainian infantry engages with anti-tank missiles. Javelin, top attack profile. Tank destroyed. The Western Column has been combat ineffective for 9 minutes. They haven't reached Ukrainian defensive positions. They haven't exchanged fire with Ukrainian infantry. They've been destroyed by artillery and mines while Ukrainian frontline forces watched from 800 meters away. And this is still just the western approach. Remember the northern and southern columns? They're still fighting, still advancing, still believing they can break through. They can, but they don't know that yet. Northern column, 5:14 a.m., 27 minutes into the assault. They've taken casualties, 6 vehicles destroyed, but they're still moving. Commander believes he's weathering the artillery storm. Just 1.2 kilometers from Ukrainian positions. Close enough to see the defensive lines. close enough to identify firing positions, close enough to believe victory is possible. Ukrainian forces fire Stagna-P anti-tank missiles. Ukrainian designed 5-kilometer range, laser beam riding guidance, 4 missiles, 4 hits, 4 destroyed vehicles in 22 seconds. The northern column's momentum breaks, not from casualties alone, from the realization that Ukrainian defenders have been holding back their direct fire weapons until the Russians were committed, until retreat was costlier than advance. Southern column commander observes the northern collapse, makes a decision, aggressive maneuver, flanking attack through a narrow valley that offers some cover from artillery. This valley is marked on his map as difficult terrain. In summer, it's a drainage ravine. In February, it's frozen solid. He thinks it's an opportunity, a blind spot in Ukrainian fire coverage. He's half right. It is a blind spot. For artillery, not for infantry. The valley funnels his column into a 400-meter stretch of ground where maneuver is impossible. Single file movement. 15 vehicles stacked one behind another. Ukrainian infantry teams are positioned on both ridges. Javelin missiles, NLO anti-tank weapons, RPG-7s with tandem warheads. They wait until all 15 vehicles are inside the valley. Then they fire, not at the lead vehicle, at vehicles 3, 7, and 12, blocking the exit, blocking the retreat, blocking any attempt to reverse. The remaining vehicles are destroyed over the next 6 minutes. The southern column commander dies when his command BMP takes an NLAOW round through the rear ram. Then timeline check 5:31 a.m., 44 minutes into the assault. Russian casualties, 47 vehicles destroyed. Approximately 340 soldiers killed, wounded, or captured. Ukrainian casualties, 2 wounded. 0 vehicles lost. This isn't a battle. This is a slaughter. And here's what makes it worse. Russian command knows it. Real-time radio intercepts confirm they're receiving casualty reports. They know the assault has failed. They know the approach routes are mined. They know Ukrainian artillery has every axis pre-registered. They know all of this. And at 7:15 a.m., 2 hours and 28 minutes into a failed assault, they send reinforcements. Not a small probe, not a reconnaissance element, a full battalion tactical group, 41 additional vehicles, 600 more soldiers into the same kill zones, along the same approach routes, against the same prepared defenses. Why? This is the question everyone asks. This is where every analysis focuses. Russian command incompetence, corruption, poor training, failure to adapt. All true. None of it explains this. Because here's what nobody talks about. The reinforcements don't take the same routes. They adjust. They spread out. They use smoke. They attempt to suppress Ukrainian artillery with counter-battery fire. They do everything Doctrine says they should do, and they still get slaughtered. February 7th, second wave, 7:40 a.m. 34 vehicles destroyed by 10:15 a.m. February 8th, third wave, 11:20 a.m. 28 vehicles destroyed by 2:00 p.m. February 9th, fourth wave, 6:30 a.m. 31 vehicles destroyed by 11 a.m. 3 days. 4 major assaults, multiple smaller probing attacks. Total Russian losses, 155 armored vehicles. Estimated 824 casualties. 31 tanks captured intact by Ukrainian forces when crews abandoned them in minefields. Ukrainian losses, 7 soldiers killed. 31 wounded. 3 vehicles damaged. 0 vehicles destroyed. This isn't incompetence. This is something else. And we're about to find out what. Let me take you back to something I mentioned at the beginning. The Ukrainians didn't fire immediately when Russians began their advance. They waited, deliberately. Standard defensive doctrine says engage at maximum range, attrite the enemy before they close, prevent them from massing for assault. Ukrainian forces didn't do this. They let the Russians advance to 2.8 kilometers, close enough to commit, close enough to believe in success, too close to retreat without entering pre-mined ground. This wasn't reactive defense. This was bait. The entire Vuhledar defensive position was designed not to stop Russian attacks but to encourage them, to create the illusion of vulnerability, to make Russian commanders believe that one more push, one more wave would break through. The strategic objective wasn't to defend Vuhledar. It was to destroy Russian armor at a rate that would cripple offensive operations across the entire southern front. Look at the numbers again, not the casualties, the equipment. 155 armored vehicles destroyed in 72 hours. That represents approximately 15% of all Russian armor losses in Ukraine during February 2023, in one location, over 3 days. But here's the critical detail. Those weren't just any vehicles. 73 of them were T-72B3 and T-80 BVM tanks. Modern variants, upgraded armor, thermal sights, the best equipment Russia was fielding in 2023. 42 of them were BMP-2M and BMP-3 infantry fighting vehicles. Not ancient Soviet stock, relatively modern systems. This wasn't Russia throwing away obsolete equipment. This was the destruction of frontline combat power that would take months to replace. And the replacements, they'd be older, less capable, drawn from strategic reserves that were already depleted. Now look at what happened after Vuhledar. Russian offensive operations along the entire Donetsk axis slowed for 6 weeks. Not because of casualties, because of equipment losses. Battalions that survived Vuhledar were pulled back, reconstituted, re-equipped with inferior vehicles. The planned spring offensive toward Pokrovsk, delayed. The pressure on Avdiivka, reduced. The assault on Marinka, stalled. One battle, 3 days. Strategic effects that lasted months. This is what I meant at the beginning. Everyone understands what happened at Vuhledar. The tactical picture is clear. But the meaning, the reason Russian commanders kept sending forces into a non-kill zone, that's where it gets interesting. Because they weren't stupid. They were trapped. Russian military doctrine in 2023 demanded offensive operations. Political pressure required visible progress. Battalion commanders were told to attack. Brigade commanders were told to show results. Division commanders were told to break through Ukrainian lines. The alternative to attacking Vuhledar wasn't regrouping for a better operation. The alternative was being relieved of command, or worse. So they attacked, again, and again, and again. Not because they believed it would work, because the cost of not attacking was higher than the cost of losing another 40 tanks. This is the dark calculus of modern warfare. Sometimes the tactical situation doesn't matter. Sometimes doctrine doesn't matter. Sometimes even obvious failure doesn't matter. What matters is the political imperative. And in February 2023, Russian military leadership needed to show offensive momentum, even if that momentum was measured in destroyed vehicles rather than captured territory. Ukrainian forces understood this. That's why Vuhledar was defended the way it was. Not to hold ground, to exploit Russian command paralysis. Every destroyed vehicle at Vuhledar was one less vehicle available for operations where breakthrough might actually be possible. Every battalion rendered combat ineffective was one less threat to Ukrainian positions elsewhere. The defender's advantage isn't just tactical, it's psychological. When you control the ground, you control the tempo. You force the attacker to make decisions on your timeline, in your kill zones, against your prepared defenses, And if the attacker's command structure demands assault regardless of conditions, then you've already won. You just have to wait for them to prove it. That's what happened at Vuhledar. February 7th through 9th, 2023. 155 Russian armored vehicles destroyed. Not through superior Ukrainian numbers, not through better equipment, through superior understanding of what the enemy had to do, and building a defensive system that turned those imperatives into mathematical certainty. 3 questions from the beginning. Time to answer them. Why did Russian commanders keep sending waves into a known kill zone? Because command paralysis and political pressure made retreat more dangerous than advance. The tactical situation didn't matter. The optics of offensive momentum did. Why did Ukrainians wait to fire? To ensure Russian forces committed fully. To guarantee they'd be inside the mind kill zone before recognizing the trap. Patience over firepower. What made this battle different from previous assaults on Vuhledar? Ukrainian forces had refined their defensive system through 2 previous Russian attacks. They knew exactly how Russians would approach. They'd calculated every variable. By February 7th, Vuhledar wasn't a defensive position. It was an engineered killing ground. The lesson here isn't about artillery or mines or drones. Those are tools. The lesson is about understanding your enemy's constraints better than they do. Russian forces at Vuhledar weren't defeated by Ukrainian firepower. They were defeated by their own command structure. Ukrainian defenders simply provided the mechanism for that defeat to manifest. Modern combined arms warfare isn't about who has more tanks or better artillery. It's about who can exploit the enemy's systemic weaknesses, who can turn their doctrine against them, who can make their strengths irrelevant and their weaknesses unavoidable. At Vuhledar, Ukraine demonstrated all 3. Which factor was most decisive? The artillery, the mines, the drones, or the understanding that Russian commanders would keep attacking regardless of odds? All of them, and none of them, because the real weapon was the system, the integration of intelligence, fires, obstacles, and defensive planning into a coherent mechanism that turned Russian offensive doctrine into a suicide pact. This is IronBullet. We analyze the battles that change wars, and Vuhledar changed how Ukraine fights defensive operations. Not by holding ground, by making that ground so costly that holding it becomes strategically irrelevant. The fields around Vuhledar are quiet now, but the wrecks remain. 155 armored vehicles. Some have been recovered, most haven't. They sit there as monuments to what happens when tactical reality collides with command paralysis. Russia eventually suspended offensive operations around Vuhledar, not because they couldn't break through, because the cost of trying had become strategically unsustainable. That's victory, not through superior force, through superior understanding of what forces the enemy into impossible choices. Subscribe to IronBullet, because in modern warfare, preparation doesn't just defeat improvisation. It turns your enemy's plans into your weapon. Real battles, real tactics, real consequences. How many vehicles did Ukraine destroy? 155. How many would have been destroyed if Russian commanders had withdrawn after the first assault failed? Probably 47. The difference, 108 vehicles, represents the cost of command paralysis over tactical judgment. If you believe defensive doctrine wins modern wars, type IronBullet in the comments. If you think this analysis missed something, tell me what. Because warfare evolves, and so must our understanding of it. The mathematics are simple. The implications are not. 155 vehicles, 72 hours, One defensive position. Strategic effects that lasted months. Stay vigilant.